off last time, or the last video, was the drive shaft needs to come off, the transmission mount, the engine mounts, and the starter power and signal cable. So those last few couple of things, I'm gonna pull over the hoist and get everything hooked up and ready to pull out. So I'm removing the bolts that hold the drive shaft to the differential itself. So once you pull the drive shaft out, you have to put a plug in the back, otherwise you're going to spill all your fluid out onto the floor and have to buy more fluid. And so this is a cheap solution for people who are not wanting to have to drain their transmission, fill it up again, and then do all this stuff when they're trying to put it back together. I think this was about 15 bucks off of Amazon. They have a variety of sizes for all sorts of tail shaft outputs. Anyways, yeah, so this is it. So it's sealing. It'll keep the transmission from draining out when I go to pull the engine out. I just need to remove the slave cylinder, disconnect the starter, loosen the engine mounts, take off my wastegate downpipe, it looks like there, and then it'll be golden. So just need to remove my shifter. So rather than disconnecting the slave cylinder and having to rebleed the clutch and everything, I opt in just disconnecting the slave cylinder from the transmission itself and letting it hang. And then, as to not lose any hardware, what I typically do is set it right back where it's supposed to go. So that way nothing gets lost and everything goes back where it's supposed to go. So next is disconnecting the starter battery positive. So obviously you need to have your battery disconnected, so this isn't a live wire, but if you do end up having it connected, please record it. I want to see I want to see you guys have fun. Signal wire from the starter. So when you go to remove the shifter, this is the tripod style mount. I'm not sure if it's any different for the one that you have to extend. I don't know, whatever. Well, it's 4 screws, and then you're able to pull the shifter out of the hole, and that's it. So this will basically give us the clearance to tilt the transmission down a little bit rather than have to go the full length of the shifter to get it out of this hole. Okay, so engine's out. One thing I forgot to highlight is my quick disconnect connector that I have on the bulkhead, basically the firewall, sorry, over there. Makes it super convenient because I don't have to sit there and disconnect every fuel injector, sensor, or anything like that. I just disconnect there, disconnect the grounds, and a few auxiliary sensors, which is just a pressure sensor and something else, and that's it, it's off. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I just now need to separate the transmission from the engine. If you guys haven't messed with a R154 setup yet, or are basically used to the KA transmission, this transmission does not separate as easily as the KA transmission. You have to basically open these access ports on the sides, and you have to loosen the pressure plate through those holes before you even get to split the transmission. So the easiest way to go about removing all the hardware that goes on the pressure plate is remove all the coil packs, remove the spark plugs, so you have no compression fighting against you. You go up to the crank pulley and you rotate until you get the bolt to line up. Basically with the hole for the slave cylinder, you get an extension and everything through there, and you'll start to loosen the hardware. And you do that little by little until you get all 6 bolts out. Once you do that, you'll be able to pull the transmission and have access to everything. Something I've learned over the years of working on cars and getting into aviation You want to basically bag everything that's supposed to go wherever it is supposed to go. You don't want to toss everything into a bucket or a box or anything like that. You basically want to separate everything as it would go. So this is hardware and brackets for the coil packs. I'm gonna have a separate bag for the coil packs themselves. I'm gonna have a bag for all the hardware that goes to the actual pressure plate and throw out fork and all that stuff. So that's just something I do, which I recommend everyone does because it keeps everything a lot easier to organize. You grab a bag and you can basically figure out all that hardware goes directly to the exhaust manifold, or all that hardware goes for the intake manifold. So it helps you get a lot more organized. So here we are loosening the flywheel or the pressure plate bolts. So I have a ratcheting breaker bar. Okay, that one's lined up. We get the impact, put it there, and we're almost out. So 2 more bolts. So I have 4 here. So the pressure plate's about to come loose. And there it goes. That's the pressure plate loose from the flywheel. So there we have it. Transmission's off of the engine. The pressure plate and the clutch stay on this shaft here. You just have to slide it out. It all comes off. So now all that's left before we set it up onto the engine stand is to remove the actual flywheel. And I'm going to start loosening the hardware that goes on the back for the rear main seal, I guess, housing piece, because I'm going to be removing the crank and everything. If you guys follow Papadakis Racing and aren't into aviation, you might have now recently seen this from him. This is called safety wire. It runs from the basically tightening direction, and the way that this works is if this bolt tries to loosen, this one will try and tighten, and if this one tries to loosen, this one will try and tighten because of the direction it's pulling in. So it basically counterbalances itself and allows the hardware to not loosen under heat, vibration, or any sort of condition with harmonics and whatnot. So we have the engine up in the air and ready to put it on the engine stand. One thing I want to highlight before I put it on the engine stand, because as the first time that I did this, I didn't really think it through. I just want to make sure that you guys are aware that this lower plate, this lower half right here, comes off with the lower oil pan. So if you're going to mount this engine stand to the engine, you need to mount it to this hole, which is right above the split line, so that way when you rotate the engine entirely, you can bring the oil pan off and not have to, you know, readjust everything. So just start up here, these 4 points, over here, over here, over here, and you'll be golden. Another little tip is mount the actual plate to the engine before you try and get this on there at the same time. Instead of having to battle this and tilt this and do that, just bolt it on first, lift up the engine as high as you need to just be able to pick this up and slide it into place. An easy way to rotate your engine once it's on the engine stand is this lever is too short typically to put much force into it. What you can do when you need to is stick the end of the stick inside of your jack handle, and that way you have more leverage to rotate. Okay, so now that the head is off, I'm basically doing a general inspection, seeing how the condition of everything is, making sure there's no gouges or any deep scratches or anything like that. Overall, the cylinder walls look okay. Now, when I take it to the machine shop, it might be a different story. So when I initially put this engine together, I was kind of worried that I put the rings backwards, and that's why it lost compression and started getting blow-by. But after further inspection, you know, removing the pistons, I'm looking them over, and you know, you start with 1, you go to 6, you know, you do your little inspections, everything looks somewhat okay. You have little scratches on the top of the piston there. This one's not too bad, but let me show you what happened to the other ones. Let me show you number 2. Number 2 isn't doing so well. You can see here, there's a split there and a split there. So the ringland cracked is basically what happened. Number 3, the ringland cracked. Number 4, the ringland cracked. Number 5, ringland cracked. That's number 5, piece broke off there. Number 6, yeah, this is no bueno. Wow, this one cracked as far as the oil control ring piece there. You can see the split there, split there. That is absolutely crazy. So okay, looks like I need pistons. And by the look of the wear on the actual rod bearings, I'm thinking polish the crank, and I think it should be okay. There's no grooves or anything on the bearings themselves. It's just I guess it brushed off the coating. Fun stuff. This is the life. This sucks. So now I need to source some pistons. Probably those are 1JZ pistons from the GTE engine that I used to have before. For the remainder of tonight, I'm going to remove these caps and take the crank out, inspect basically the bearings and make sure everything's okay, at least in the main bearings. And I'm just going to present everything back, and I want to take this block over to get machined and honed and all that stuff, but I also want to take my crank to them so they can give it a polish. This wasn't exactly what I was expecting to find. As soon as I pulled out one of the pistons and I saw that rupture, I was like, oh my god. And I figured, is it just this piston? And yeah, so it's like 4 out of the 6 pistons are done. So yeah, the pistons are dead, and I don't really know what caused it. Hopefully if I get some forged pistons, that doesn't happen. But yeah. Ouch, this hurts. It's gonna be more money now. So the date to keep on drifting keeps getting pushed further back and back with every step that I take. So if you're getting into drifting, avoid getting any sort of idea where you're like, oh, I need horsepower to drift. Oh, I need angle to drift. Oh, I need a hydro to drift. Like, keep your setup as simple as possible. Get a stock RB20, get a stock SR20, get your stock e-brake, you know, tighten up the cable, change the brake pads, get some drilled and slotted rotors, you know, up the tire pressure if you want to act like you have more horsepower. But if you're like just getting into drifting, you don't want to do all of this stuff, because it's like I got to drift for a few months and I'm here again, like in the garage. And when I had my stock RB20, I was drifting probably every single event that I could afford, and that was, you know, as often as I could. Like I said, if you're getting into drifting, just get a very simple setup, get out on the track, get your seat time, and progress with your vehicle. So if you have 600 horsepower angle kit and you can't drive it, you've wasted your time. So then you're gonna break your car, and then you're gonna sit there and pay for it and fix it and do this and that, and you're really gonna have a bad taste for drifting. But if you sit there with just a stock RB20 that overheats on the fucking on the ready line, you're gonna have a lot more fun than the guy that's sitting there pulling his engine every couple of months. So keep it simple and just build your car as you progress as a driver, because otherwise you're never going to get to drive like me So yeah. So tomorrow's video will be taking the engine block to TEC, taking my turbo to Havoc Speed Shop, and just trying to source some pistons. So it's a sad way to go, but I'll see you guys on the next video.